Hey, what's going on, Team Trek family? Welcome back. We've got a phenomenal episode. I'm really excited about this one. A new friend of mine, new into my life, but he's got a story that I can't wait for y'all to hear. So, without further ado, Martin Acosta, welcome to Team Trek podcast. I'm really happy to have you here, brother.
Hey, it's a blessing to be here, man. Many blessings, and our friendship is has been interesting, but I love where it's going.
Right. So real quick, we'll talk. We'll talk how we came to be. I reached out to an entrepreneur, friend of a friend, and he agreed to meet with me. I wanted to talk to him about kind of where I saw some ideas going, and the meeting. It really didn't go the way that I thought it was going to go. We had the conversation kind of derailed and kind of turned 180 degrees. And when I left there with the name Marty Marr, and he told me, I'm gonna have him reach out to you, and basically made a connection between the two of us. Within a simple phone call, you set a meeting to link up, and after work one day, I went up and we met and had our first discussion. So that discussion brought us to really what we're here to talk about today, which is some alternative medicines as treatments for service members and, well, let's just be honest, humans that have severe traumas, PTSDs, TBIs, and some alternative medicines that have come to be that you've gotten the opportunity to experience.
Yes, nothing happens by chance. We were meant to link up, and we were meant to start something. And kind of what I want to share with you and the rest of the people here today is it's another tool set, a different point of view of attacking the problem that we all know exists, which is mental health and suicide. So this psychedelic space, it's definitely another tool set for us to use, and the journey there was not easy, but there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, let's talk about, before we get into the journey into that medicine space. I really want here at Team Trek, we're a family, and I want all of our viewers to really feel like they know you. I want them to know where you came from. So if you would take us back to where the days in Chicago, where you grew up, tell me what your family was like. Tell us who you were when you were that teenager and going through high school and then figuring out your way into the military, and then what then came to be. So if you don't mind, let's start back there.
No, absolutely. So I originally was born in El Paso, Texas. So I was originally born there. I don't really claim Texas because I don't know a lot about it. Pretty much I was born there, and then lived a good portion of our life in Chicago in the early 90s. And I'm gonna be really open about my life here. So I'm gonna be saying some stuff that a lot of people haven't really heard before. I won't go into details, but my dad was involved with not the right people. So for a period of our time, from what I could remember in my childhood, this is again late 80s, early 90s, we moved around a lot. Like we moved around from Mexico to Chicago and back and forth. We never had, I don't remember living in one place for longer than a year. I have memories of my house getting raided by cops. I don't know at what level, but I remember seeing my dad at jail a few times. And I never really understood until later in life that, he was involved with certain people. I don't know if he owed money or whatever, but pretty much for a period of time, our lives were in danger. So we had to keep moving. And again, I didn't find anything out till much later in life. So that was part of my childhood. I remember I never really established friends when my dad was around. I just remember there's a lot of good times. You know, he did take care of a lot of people, but unfortunately, drugs and alcohol kind of took priority in his life. And around 1997, when my sister was born, he wasn't even there. Like he had left. And he never said goodbye. He was the type of person that just like, he was there one day and then he wasn't. And that was pretty much the last time I saw him. It was before my sister was born. So my baby sister, she never really got to meet him. She never got to see him in person. She just knows stories and pictures. So he left. My sister was born in February, in 97. So I don't know I can't remember how long he had been gone by that point. But my sister was born, and honestly, when he left, is kind of when it was really hard for us. Just, you know, he did everything for us. You know, he was a provider. So when he left, it was the first time my mom really had to work and take care of us. And it was really hard. You know, she was in her late 20s. She had 3 boys and a girl. You know, I was the oldest at that time, and I think I was in 2nd grade. So, you know, she was fairly young. You know, she always had a man to take care of us. And, you know, one day he was just gone. And so, but even though life sucked, you know, we didn't have a lot, it was peaceful, you know, because we finally had some stability. You know, we lived in the house that we lived in the south side of Chicago, you know, for a few years. I got involved with sports. I pretty much went down the line, played every sport that you know, depending on the season. And that was pretty much it, you know. I finished out my high school years in the town of Cicero, which is right outside Chicago. It's most commonly known for Al Capone. So I finished out my high school years there. But even as you know, not coming from a lot of money, always trying to make it. In my high school years, I kind of got involved with gangs, you know, like 8th grade, freshman year. It was a very short period of time, but I did get involved with gangs. And when I say I got involved, yeah, the whole thing, I got jumped in. You know, jumping in is, you know, getting initiated, you know, where you just get beat up by a bunch of Jews for a certain period of time. And then once they beat you up, they welcome you in. So that, based on the situation that I was in at that time, that was kind of like the only friends that I had and just the only influence that I had. My mom was always working, so I don't really blame her for that. She was trying to provide. So, you know, ultimately it was my decision to choose those people and try to make it work with them. So I never got to do anything really bad. I think when I realized that it was not something I wanted to do, it was hard because you can't just get out of a gang, you know? Like, it's not like they're gonna let you walk away unless you have like, you're financially stable where you could just pick up and move just like that to a whole nother part of the country. Like, it's really not an option. Like, hey, to say like, hey, I'm done with you guys. Like, I want to be a better person. It just doesn't work like that. And this person I'm gonna talk about, he's very special in my life. And actually, I ended up reconnecting with him a few years ago. I, I remember we were in the cafeteria, and I was hanging out with my hooligan friends, and we see a cop approaching us, and automatically we're like, shit, they're gonna go up through our lockers or whatever. Something happened, so everybody kind of scatters, and I remember he's just like, hey. He went specifically after me. And I was like, at that point, I was like, I haven't really done anything bad. I just been hanging around with the wrong kind of people. Maybe I've been in a few fights, And he started talking to me about basketball, which completely surprised me. Like I think at that point in freshman year, I was about 6'2". So he approached me and we started talking to me about basketball. And it's like, essentially, was like, hey, trials are coming up. Are you going to show up? And this was sophomore year of high school. And essentially, he kept coming around to the point that he convinced me, like, hey, you're going to be there. Essentially, he wasn't really asking me. He was like, hey, you're going to be there. And I showed up, made the team, but the coach pulled me aside and said, I'm going to cut you. And the reason was because the previous year, freshman year, because of the people that I was hanging out with, I pretty much blew school off, and I didn't have the GPA to be eligible to play that season, or at least the first part of the season. So he told me, he broke it down. He's like, hey, you're good enough to play, but what am I going to use you for? So I'm going to have to cut you, get your grades up, and maybe good luck next year. But it wasn't that cop. It was because of that cop that pulled me aside. He talked to the coach and essentially told him he's going to do everything he can to play the second half of the season for the second semester. And so he gave me a chance. I was on the team. It was hard. It was hard. Like the first half of the season, I just bench warmer, water guy. Couldn't play. Got my grades up. And I played the second semester of sophomore year. And once I finished the season, essentially, when we finished the season, I got moved up to varsity for the playoffs. So at the end of sophomore year, I really had gotten into basketball, and I really wanted to pursue it at that point. And but I still had the gang thing, So the question was, how was I going to get out of it? I don't know what happened. I don't know how they agreed to it, but I talked to them, and essentially I told them I wanted out, but I wasn't moving anywhere. I was still going to be there. I needed to do something else. Somehow they understood. They're like, all right, you're getting jumped out. So it was like twice the beating of getting jumped in. Took the beating, got out of the game, but I still saw them every day because they were neighbors. I lived on the second house of the block. The corner house was the hangout spot. Like my neighbor's nephew, which was in the gang. He was in 4th grade when he got shot. You know what I mean? So like, I got my CIB before the military, dude.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So. I got shot at way before the military.
How'd they treat you? So now that you're out and you live right there, obviously you're seeing them every day. Are they going to games supporting you, or are they giving you a hard time? How are they treating you?
Some of them were still in school, in high school, so I would still see them. Respect, dude. Somehow respect. So one of my nicknames in Chicago, people usually call me Stretch. And it came from like one of those old games, and it was a real tall guy playing basketball and Stretch. So that's kind of where my name came from. So I don't know, between that and I don't know, I was just like a man about it. I wasn't gonna hide. I was like, hey man, this is the deal. They just kind of accepted it, and after a while, which much later, you know, because there was a few people that got shot, a few friends that got killed, but one of them that had gotten shot, which a couple years ago he got killed. He came up to me and he was like, you know what, Stretch? He said, I'm effing proud of you, dude. He's like, you left this shit behind and you're trying to make a better life for yourself. And he said, even though these other motherfuckers don't want to accept it or don't want to say it, it's like they're all thinking it. They all wish they had the balls that you had to say, hey, give me my ass whooping, I'm getting out. So it was only that one person that told me that, but so I kind of took his word for it based on how they still treated me. They still called me Stretch, like, hey, Stretch, boom, hey. And it's funny because I would go back much later when I joined the military, and I would go back. People weren't sure that I joined the military. They just thought I went off to jail or something. And then like just seeing the new like game bangers, I guess, in the area, you know, they usually unfamiliar faces, they'll come up to you and be like, hey man, especially if you got tattoos or whatever, they'll come up to you and be like, hey, what are you about? Trying to, they call it checking you, see if you're from another gang. And some of the old timers that were around when I was there, they'd be like, yo, that's Stretch right there. You just leave him alone. So somehow I still had the respect with not being in it. And it was, you know, thanks to that one guy that he told me, he's like, hey man, you just did what everybody was too scared to do. So I didn't know it at the time, but I was very blessed that happened that way. And I pretty much just finished high school playing basketball. I've always had the thought of joining the military, but you know, my mom has worked all her life and I was the oldest guy. So, and she always kind of like put it in me, like, you gotta set the example. You're the man of the house, you know, at a very young age, like you're the man of the house, like you have to set the example. So, it was, and the military is not a big thing in Hispanic families, you know, it's like, they don't really know the difference. To me, everybody thinks they're an infantryman, whether whatever branch you are, everybody's an infantryman in their eyes, you know? So, so I couldn't really pull the trigger on the military just yet. My mom started dating somebody. Eventually they got married. And that's kind of when I saw my ticket out. You know, I was like, oh, there's somebody else that could help out. It's my turn, my time to leave. And then I was starting to fall back. You know, that was after high school, obviously. I tried, I did play college ball for a semester. College kind of ruined sports for me. It was more like a job than a passion. So I was like, you know, I'm not that passionate. I'm gonna pursue something else. And I was thinking about the military, but between college and the military and joining the military, I started just, you know, just working and, you know, not really saving, partying, you know, doing what 20, 21-year-olds do. And I started hanging out with more and more like the wrong crowd. And I finally just, you know, I think I was at the neighbor's house that the shooting happened. And they were playing, I think, one of the Call of Duty games or something. They were playing one of those games and kept talking about how cool it is and blah, blah. And in my head, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go do this for real. And I remember I got up, left, went back to my house and started researching. And there was a recruiter about 2 blocks down, which he's one of my best friends to this day. Like, Joe, you're awesome, bro. So I went to go talk to him. Originally, I had it in my head that I wanted to be a ranger. So I was chasing that ranger contract. But yeah, that was kind of how I grew up and how I got into the military.
So, so recap: Call of Duty is ultimately what put it in your head what you wanted to do.
Between
So
that and Rambo, yeah.
that's awesome. I never really looked at Call of Duty in that way, but I think that came out after I was in the military, so I can. That might have a little bit of reasoning behind
It might
my
have been
son
that or
getting
Medal of
into it.
Honor. I might be dating myself, but yeah, it was one of those games.
So when you came in, how old were you when you joined?
I had just turned 21. It
Okay.
was I shipped out 2 weeks after my 21st. Well, 3 weeks. It was my birthday is the 22nd of October, and my first day in the military was November 9th,
Okay. So what year?
2009.
Okay. So what kind of contract did you come in on?
So, from what I know now, at Ranger Battalion was over strength at that time, so they were very limited. They were giving out very limited Ranger contracts, and at that point, I didn't really know about the 18 X-ray program. So I just kind of went off what my recruiter told me. He was like, "Hey, they're always looking for volunteers in basic training. You know, it's like the Rangers are gonna come in. They're gonna say, who wants to go to Ranger Bat? And all you gotta do is raise your hand. So he's like, that's your best shot to get where you want to be. So I just came in as an 11 Bravo. Came in as 11 Bravo. Went through all the basic training, and then came back from the big FTX, and they're kind of handing out like your assignments, kind of where you're going to. And I was going back to El Paso. I was going to Bliss.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I was going back to Bliss, and I was just like, I guess. And all this time, I was like, where are the Rangers? You know, I haven't seen them. When they're gonna show up? And when I came in, it was very heavy, like 18 X-ray. I want to say half of my platoon was 18 X-rays, and throughout all the basic training, they kind of gave me an idea of what it was. So
what were you hearing about it? Excuse me. What were you hearing about as you were going through? Because you said you came in as 11 Bravo, which is just a straight leg infantryman, not airborne, just
straight.
infantryman.
Yeah.
And you're hoping that the Ranger Regiment recruiters are coming by to give you that opportunity to go and try out to go to regiment, but you're not seeing those guys.
No.
And you're hearing about this 18 X-ray program, which is,
And the way they explain it is like, yeah, it's like Rangers eventually go to SF. And then they kind of explained to me, and then somebody threw the Rambo reference, and I was like, oh, so it started clicking. So there was a SF recruiter that was coming around to check in on the X-rays, and somehow I was able to get a hold of him, and he said, all right, tell your drill sergeant, you're going to come see me tomorrow at this time, which was the day before graduation. So it was like the family's already in town. The next day is the graduation. So he has me, I go talk to him, and he goes over my paperwork, PT score, everything. He's like, so you want to go SF? And I was like, yes, Sergeant. He's like, done. Go give this to your drill sergeant, tell him your orders are cank your arse now. So that was it. Went to airborne school, went to Bragg. They did a really good job. The SOFC program, what does it stand for? Something preparatory course. They did a pretty good job at training us. And I was fresh out the streets. I had never even been camping. Like, I was just straight south side of Chicago. Like, so
inner city.
Yeah, dude, everything's all new to me. Like, I was, I've never been camping, hunting, none of that stuff. So the Army was a big culture shock for me. Like, it was like a shotgun blast. Like, everything was new to me. Taking orders from somebody. Like, it was. We did have a bull ring, at nighttime in the barracks. We just call each other out. So that was kind of how we took care of our frustrations. But everything was just like, besides that, like, everything was new to me. Yeah, I went to SOPC, then I went to selection. I don't really remember selection that much. I just remember it was just like, it sucked, but I felt like I was full of energy. So like, it sucked, just the not sleeping and eating, but you know, it was like a big like PT obstacle course. You know, it was weird. And I was just kept listening. Honestly, I spent most of my time just like listening to stories from all the other, service members that came from other units, and just be like, what was war like, and what was this like? But yeah, that was essentially what selection was. Got selected. Originally, I was trying to skip language because I had Spanish. I was already native Spanish speaker, so I was trying to get to seventh group. I wanted to go to seventh group. I think at that time they were still at Bragg, and they're transitioning down to Florida. So I really wanted to go to seventh group, but for some reason, when I got my orders, I had French and 10th group. So I don't remember the major that was there giving the brief, but I remember I went up to him, talked to him, told him my situation, and same thing. It just happened. He's like, "All right, just scratched it out. Said you're gonna learn posture, and you're going to seventh group." It was like simple. So it's just, I feel like all these things that were happening to me was leading up to the person that I am now. So went through the Q course straight through, and then I got to seventh group back in March of 2012, and then that was my journey to SF. I did typical deployments down south, Afghanistan, and then ultimately led to February 8th, which was a big incident for my ODA, and it was just life changing.
Okay, so that basically you went through about 2 years where were in just a training environment the entire time. You never made it to a unit. So that SOPC program, it's the preparatory course that gets you ready first for selection, and then once you make it through that, then the second part of it gets you ready for your small unit tactics phase. And then, of course, the language advantage that you had being a Spanish speaker, which ultimately is what got you to seventh group, but you still had to go learn Pashto. So they weren't letting you cut any corners, even though you had all that stuff. And I think that's the way you described how that worked out. It's you're that perfect example of going in with a plan, and that plan just working because you went to the right person at the right time. So it was a timing thing, right?
Yeah, you could say that.
And then, so when you got to seventh group, that being your first unit, what rank were you?
I was an E5.
So you were just a sergeant, just a sergeant E5, and you didn't talk about what was your MOS? Or what was your job?
I was an 18 Echo, the commo sergeant.
Okay, so as a communicator, so growing up in the inner city, did you do anything that had anything to do with communications, or were you big into car stereo installation or extraction?
Honestly, no, which is weird. I did a lot of carpentry. I did like the carpentry trade throughout high school. So I consider myself a carpenter, woodworker. But I didn't want to be a Charlie because I was like, I already have some of that skill. I was like, I wanted a completely different skill that I didn't have. That's kind of why I went after the Echo, which is I didn't know anything about it. I just wanted a whole new skill.
And so, how much of that, being an 18 Echo, you stayed your whole time as an 18 Echo? Did you ever change to any of the other MOSs?
Yes. I became a Fox later in my career. 18 Fox, the intelligence sergeant.
Okay, so you like to expand. You like to get your hands on stuff, try to somewhat master it, and then move on to something new. What was it that you liked more, the intel side or the commo side?
I think the camo side, just because it was my first one, and even as a fox, I was very critical on my echoes. I was like, yeah, bro. But I don't know. It was always changing. It's always something new. By the time you master the equipment, I was like, hey man, you got an upgrade. You gotta forget that, relearn something. So for me, it was the challenges that came with that MOS. It was just you had to be on top of your game and kind of expect like, hey, this is probably coming next. So you just gotta stay ahead of the game, because you know how it is, you know.
Well, look at just your phone, right? You get a new phone, and within a year they're coming out with something completely different. Well, it's the same way in the military communications, but those upgrades, they don't talk to each other quite as seamlessly. Now you're changing out to an entirely new radio system or program, and so I think that's what you're talking about, right? It's like that tech still continues to move and grow just as fast as it does on the civilian side, but now you're trying to do it with a sense of it's got to be a more robust package. You've got to be able to do it with in inclement weather and getting wet. So brand new systems have to be developed in a lot of those cases.
Yeah, and the stress that came with it, because the commanders, they didn't like hearing issues. It's like, hey, I need it now, and now means like right now. So it was just, I like that challenge, especially when it was in a combat deployment. It was just an opportunity to just keep learning.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to get to February 8th. So getting back into it, brother. So we took a quick break. Had to just kind of recenter, right? What we're about to talk about, probably the hardest thing you've ever dealt with so far. Harder than anything most of us can fathom. And
Definitely the worst day of my life. Nothing compares to what happened that day. All right, so February 8th, I think at that point, we were not even a month in, just we're like 29 days in country. It was short. But that deployment in 2020, we hit the ground running. We deployed shortly after the new year, like mid-January. So we're doing a KLE, key leader engagement. We were going to the Shirzai district governor, and there was some stuff that we needed to go in there. Some of the things that we do. So we went in with the KLE, did our engagement. Nothing out of the ordinary. Everybody's a suspect. It was my ODA. We had Sergeant Major, and then one of the majors. We had two majors at deployment. We had one of the majors with us, along with support from the 82nd. We had a squad of the 82nd to go out with us, along with the commando unit that we were working with. Finish our engagement. There was back and forth between us and higher. I think it was something along the lines that the pilots didn't feel comfortable coming back during the day. We had to wait at nighttime. And our argument was that we didn't want to be there, if we didn't need to. You're going to make us be here, another 10 hours? So there's a lot of back and forth going on throughout the day. Minimal activity in the compound. We had a perimeter pretty good. The compound that we selected, it had 4 big towers in the corner, so we put our 82nd guys there. So it was pretty secure. We were controlling the traffic going in and out. It was as secure as it could be. I guess I should say that. finally it gets to that time, and I'm like, hey, exfil's coming. We got to get ready. And what do we do? Go back to the rucksack area. I had my senior commo guy was monitoring comms all day. So we started doing the buddy thing, like, hey, take off your cold gear, everything working, knots, whatever it is, And I remember my senior Bravo came up to me. We got along pretty good. Like, it was like he was one of my homies, and there was a lot of back and forth between me and him. A lot of shit going. Like, we gave each other a lot of shit. Like, it was that kind of friendship. Like, so he came by me. He's like, "Come on, Foxy, let's go. Let's do a perimeter check, and then that way we make sure the 82nd guys are getting the shit ready too." For some reason, I was like, "Nah, man." I was like, "I'm gonna stay here. Continue to be next to the radio, see if anything changes." And at that moment, my 18 Delta took my place. So him and the Bravo left the little rucksack area. A lot of stuff happened that day. Once that exchange happened, it's kind of when it's gonna start to get crazy. But there's a lot of stuff that I went out pretty soon, so I'm gonna try to remember as best I can. How it got initiated, is what I was told, and some of the reports that came out and some of the teammates that we talked to afterwards.
So if I can just kind of recap that a little bit for the audience at home. So you go into an area, a very populated area. We're not going to say minimally manned. You've got a decent force with you. You do the operation, and now there's going to be a delay before you can get extracted out and move back to your base. During that time, you set up your perimeter, made sure that your security was out. Now, as extraction's coming, you're starting to prepare for that movement and for that extraction, starting to, what we would say, collapse your security back and get ready to move. And during that time, you're now doing the commo watch portion, listening to the radios, making sure there's no changes, everything's still coming. Is that pretty
correct? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's correct. So after that, we're at that point. There was, from what I was told in the reports, one of the commandos left this saw, is a unsecure M249, and one of the ANA police picked it up, went through the building that was behind me, and then essentially it was about maybe 15 meters away. So he came out. I never saw it coming. He came out, and all I remember is hearing the first burst, and it was so close. Like, what's happening. Everything you've been taught starts clicking, and I just felt the impacts. It's just like I felt several impacts, and then I remember I tried to take a step forward, and I just collapsed. I collapsed on top of my senior 18 Echo Jaguar. So I collapsed on top of him. I could kind of tell that he's been hit too. At that point, the only thing that I could feel was my legs, just below the waist, was just kind of like I knew something was wrong. Like the pain had really kicked in. I just remember like a very cold feeling starting to creep up, and like a numbness, and I couldn't feel my legs. So I definitely knew something was wrong. But it feels like I'm slowing down time talking about it, but it all happened within like 20 seconds. But it just felt like time was just so slow. I fell on top of my 18 Echo, and we just kind of looked at each other, and there was like a barrier wall behind him. And I remember like that first burst as I was going down, I just remember seeing those impacts hit that wall. It was just so many. And so I'm on top of him, and there's like a little ditch, like one of those like shit ditches behind him. And in all reality, all he had to do is just roll over to the side and crawl into the ditch. But he didn't. It was like we made eye contact, and it was like I push you, you pull me type of thing. Like, then I don't know, maybe it felt like it was a long time, but in reality is probably like 10 seconds apart. The second burst came in. I never, like I said, I never saw it coming. Everything was in the back. I just remember that second burst came in, and I felt more impact. You know, just I felt more impact, and it's very this picture. One of the rounds, like it was so close, you know, I felt it. Like it was so close that, you know, 6 inches to the right, it would have been my head. And we were like making eye contact, and I just like, he took one, you know. And I saw his head cock back, and like, I just knew what happened, but there was so much going on. And that second burst just took out this whole side that I felt like I couldn't move. And then everything just went quiet. Just quiet. Like, and I just remember having, like, I was face down. And I just remember just very heavy exhales, like, and I just remember like they were so heavy, like the dirt would like kick up, you know, like it, and then kind of blur me, and then like I could kind of see, you know, there was chaos going on, but I couldn't hear anything. It was everything was just silent, and I could kind of hear the chaos going on, and the 18 Delta that my medic that kind of switched spots with me, that he went out to do the perimeter check. He's the one that came up to me. Later I found out he's the one that took out the shooter. And then I don't know if that was the first casualty he saw, but he came to me. And I remember he just like flipped me over, and just the look in his face, like, kind of said it all. Like, it was like I knew it wasn't good. But before he turned me, like, when everything was quiet, the only thing I could think of was about my wife and kids, dude. Like you never, you know, being on a team like that, you never accept fear. You know, you never. You don't think you think you're invincible. You know, you never think that's ever gonna happen to you. You never go into any situation or any operation, you know, with fear. And the fear that I felt was not really about dying. It was more of like, I'm leaving my family behind. Like, just the thought of just my kids calling somebody else dad. Like, whoa, you know, like, oh, that emotion just started rushing in. And I got interrupted when my medic came up to me and he flipped me and gave me that look, and then it kind of snapped me out of it, like what's gonna happen. And I remember he went after my left hand and just grabbed my hand, and when he tried to drag me, like my whole hand just almost came apart. Like the only thing, like maybe a muscle and tissue was holding it together. The entire elbow and forearm was shattered. And that's when the noise came back and the pain kicked in. That's when I felt pain like I've never felt before. Like the only thing I could think of was pain. And he quickly dropped that hand, went after my right hand. And when he started dragging me, it's when I started feeling like my upper extremity and my lower extremity was just like coming apart. Is I remember screaming and begging him to stop. Like just I remember trying to get him to just stop moving me, and I remember he told me, sorry, that I have to. So he dragged me around one of the barrier walls to cover, and he started working on me, you know, put tourniquets, you know, stuff in the wounds. And I've always I was always very proud of joining the military. I was one of those people that carried a flag out on every op. So I had it, and I had it between myself and my back plate. So I had a flag, and honestly, at that point, I was trying to make my peace, like trying to accept what was coming. He, I remember telling him that the pain sucked, something along those lines, and he gave me, I think, like he said, 100 milligrams of ketamine, and he said I'll be back when. Helped out some other dudes, and then he came back and he started talking to me again, and that's when I was like, dude, like I don't feel shit, like it's like it's coming. And I remember like I pulled him down close to me and like trying to whisper in his ear, and that's when I told him, I was like, hey man, like there's a flag in my back plate, can you just please look out after my kids. um and then shortly after that, he said he gave me another run of ketamine, and that's when the lights went dark. So the lights went dark, and then yeah, that day, February 8th, we lost two guys. We lost Jaguar and A-Rod, and 6 U.S. Were injured. Myself and five other, and then I don't know how many Afghan casualties there were. I never really cared to look into it after the fact, but that's when the lights went dark the first time, and I didn't really know what was happening. people ask me like, where'd you go? Like you died, like then you were in a coma. Like, what do you remember? For me, it was always like pure darkness. Like just I don't know what that meant. I woke up. I believe it was 4.5 days later. That's when I woke up in Germany. The After a procedure, finally I came out of it, where I was gonna be stable enough to get transported to the U.S. But before all that happened, I was like on the list. Like I think originally I came in as a KIA, and then through social media, my wife found out information way before, the military personnel were able to inform her. So, so that kind of sucked. But so when I was in Germany, I wasn't originally. They were saying I wasn't gonna make it, so the military was talking to my wife, but they weren't giving her all the facts. From what she's told me, they told her that I wasn't stable enough, that I was gonna have to be in Germany longer. So they were trying to do her visa stuff, so to get her to Germany. When in reality, it wasn't looking good. Like they wanted her there to say goodbyes, but something happened. I was fortunate enough to be surrounded by a phenomenal medical staff that I came out of it. And then I was stable enough to get put on a plane and get transported to Walter Reed.
That's unbelievable. So it was so bad. They had you listed as KIA, and your wife heard about that via social media and started reaching out to find out what was going on, to then find the answers that they're going to stabilize you in Germany or keep you there longer to get you stabilized. And she needed to come out there because you'd be there for a while, when in reality it was really being planned that this was going to be her last chance to say goodbye.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah, and then that essentially made it to Walter Reed. And that's when, I remember landing and getting to the hospital, and then just like I remember my room flooded with people. Like at that point I was on external fixators. The biggest injuries that I had was my left femur was shattered. It was my sciatic nerve was severed. I don't really know how many rounds exactly. They've said between 6 and a dozen. It was my right side got hit, left side. I had some internal bleeding going on, and then my entire left forearm and elbow were kind of shattered. So pretty much all three limbs. I only had my right hand for a long time. I was in the ICU for a little bit. Every medication you could think of, all the way up to methadone. I was like, it got so bad that my veins were done. So I had probably 9 lines, some PICC lines coming in. It was getting really bad where they just couldn't stick me anymore. I think by the time I got to the U.S., I had 13 units of blood. So yeah, I was in Walter Reed, multiple surgeries. I was in Walter Reed for about 4 months. From there, I got transported down to the Tampa VA, which I was there for another 3-4 months, which that place had challenges of its own. And then probably somewhere around 8 or 9 months, I think, is finally when the hospital said there's nothing they could do for me, so they released me back to my unit. That's when I went back to back home later that year in 2020.
So almost 2 years.
It was 1 full year, and I would say almost 1 full year in the hospital situation, the first year. But I left the hospital like in a wheelchair, very small hope of ever walking again, or at least on my own.
When did you get released from the hospital and sent home?
August, September timeframe of 2020. So what would that put that? August. Yeah, so it was like September, so like 7 months like hospital, but 2020, so it was COVID.
Right.
So that opened up the whole mental health dilemma in my life that I never thought I would experience. Yeah, I made it home after 7 months in the hospital. And that's when a lot of the problems, unexpected problems started arising, started coming out. Some of the big challenges were, mobility, like how was I going to get around? At that point, I think I was fine to stay in, like I wanted to be back in and that's when kind of life started getting hard at home. And